Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this information session on the call for proposals on European Agri-food Sustainability Cluster Partnerships. My name is Martina Bacova. I work at EISMEA, the European Innovation Council and SMEs Executive Agency, and I'm the call coordinator for this call for proposals. On behalf of all the colleagues involved in this preparation of this call for proposals, I'm happy to see the interest in this call, and we have 2.5 hours today foreseen to explain to you everything so that your application is hopefully successful. So we will explain you the rationale and the policy context behind this call. But we also will emphasize all the technical requirements that you need to fulfill in order to be successful. Also, we will highlight the expectations that we have on the running projects. So please listen carefully, because all this information will contribute to your successful application here. Let me present to you the agenda. Please, next slide. So we have 2.5 hours, as I was saying, with 4 presentations. We will start with the presentation of the background, the policy context and scope, and continue with the presentation on the general information of on the call for proposals. After that, we will have a question and answer session that mainly should relate to the 2 presentations you will hear first. If you will not manage to submit your question on time, or it comes to your mind later, no problem, because there will be another Q&A session at the very end of the event. But basically, the second part will focus on the registration of participants. So what are the requirements for your organization and your partner organizations in your proposal to register and to participate in this call? And we will conclude with the presentation on the financial provisions of the call. As I was saying, at the very end, we will have another question and answer sessions, which will gather all the questions to all presentations that you heard this morning. Next slide, please. Some housekeeping rules. So in this webinar, your microphone and camera are switched off by default. You are not able to switch them on. This meeting is recorded. If you don't wish your name to appear in the recording, please make sure to submit your questions via Slido anonymously. You will see in the next slide the Slido QR code, and you have the opportunity to select anonymous. I must say on this option that we will, in this webinar, try to answer most of the questions that we receive. However, if you submit questions anonymously and they will not be answered during this webinar, it will be difficult for us to come back to those questions and identify you and answer to you. So in preference, please, of course, if you want to make sure that the questions are answered, so put your name, because like this we can link you to the list of participants. Otherwise, please resubmit your questions. You will see in the presentations the functional mailbox which you can use to submit your questions. So in order to make sure that the questions are really all answered, you always have the possibility to resubmit them to the email that we will present to you later. So the slides and the recording of this meeting will be available, will be published, and they will be published on the EISMEA website, notably on the webpage of the call for proposals. So there you can distribute this also to your partners and that are preparing proposals with you, so that they can also watch this recording and check also the FAQ questions and the slides. You will receive after the event an email with all the links, so that you have all the information at hand if you at your ease to rewatch this recording. Next slide, please. This is the QR code to Slido. You can either scan the QR code or you join at slido.com using the hashtag AgriCluster to log in and submit your questions. As I was saying, you have the opportunity to choose to submit them anonymously if you wish to do so. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to the first speaker, which is Elin Dage, Deputy Head of Unit at DG Grow, the Director General for Industry, Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Helene is the Head of Unit of the Deputy Head of Unit of Food, Retail and Health Unit at the DG Grow. And she will talk about the background, the policy context, and the scope of the call for proposals. Helene, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So let me introduce you this call, which is about the creation of European Agri-food Sustainability Cluster Partnerships. So first, I believe that many of the participants today are actually members of cluster organizations. And you know that we have for many years encouraged, supported the creation of some forms of cluster partnerships, which have demonstrated that they are a very powerful tool, that the collaboration between those cluster organizations enables them to help much better their SMEs, and especially to help those SMEs to either find new markets or to find new ways to improve also their resource efficiency in general and the way their innovation very largely. So this call the aim is to create those cluster partnerships, especially for the agri-food sector. So it will be especially for the agri-food industry. So this call is not going to be covering the primary stage of food production, neither the retail part. It is about really the preparation, the transformation industry, and across the whole European area. So what do we want to do there? To give the opportunity over 30 to 36 months to groups of cluster organizations to help their SMEs to produce more sustainably the food, and also to lower their cost base. Next slide, please. So this is in the context of the implementation of the Farm to Fork strategy. So the Farm to Fork strategy is the strategy in general for transition of the EU food system towards more sustainability. So the global objectives is to limit, of course, the environmental impact of food production, to also ensure food security, and so that's also something which is important, even if now there is no major issue in the EU from that point of view. But also that covers also going into the direction eventually of diets which will be a bit more healthy and better also for the citizens. And finally, an objective which is very important in the present context, which is preserving also the affordability of food. Because the present food inflation has made it even more difficult for parts of the citizens in Europe, and this part is quite significant, to actually be able to buy food. And so therefore it's also very important to try to help companies eventually to lower their cost base and to be able to then preserve this affordability of food. Next slide, please. So this is why we have devised also this idea of projects between different clusters, which will have to then select some specific teams with a view to implementing those large objectives of the Farm to Fork strategy. So I mentioned already the nutritional composition of food, but also the environmental footprint. You see that's directly in line with that. Also everything which is linked to food waste, which can be at any stage of the value chain, and trying to limit that. Everything which relating to valorizing the materials which are used and having less use of those materials, and reusing what eventually might be not directly used by the company itself, it might become a resource for another company. So the notion of circular economy. Next slide, please. And then reduce, yes, I'm going to wait so that we have the right slide. Thank you. Oh, the former one, please. Then everything which is about the deployment, of course, of with renewable energy. And also using less energy. So on renewable energy, this is also because we realize that the cost of energy is a significant cost which has increased dramatically for companies, which of course is impacting their cost of production and the price of food. But we see that there might be a good potential also of deploying more renewable energy solutions for companies. We also realize it might be difficult for a company to do it on its own. Because it might be better to have different types eventually of renewable energy, or to have a system which is encompassing production across the different sites and different types of renewable energy. And so there we think that also it makes a lot of sense to do that through partnerships, which will then group companies to do a project in common. Improving water efficiency, that's also a clear objective, not only for the cost, but also we see now the problems that we have with either too much water or too little water in many regions. So this is something which is becoming even more important. Also deploying the new bioeconomy-based solutions, and finally packaging. So I'm going to present to you a bit more in detail later, but so that you understand the policy context, I wanted to start with that. Next slide, please. So you might think, okay, that's all very nice, and so that's the political vision, and this is coming from a very ambitious objectives in terms of sustainability transition for industry, and so this is maybe over-ambitious from a political point of view for companies to do all of that. But actually, all the priorities that I just presented to you, which are going to be the priorities and what we propose to help you implement through those projects, actually, those are directly extracted from the EU Code of Conduct on Responsible Food Business and Marketing Practices. And this Code of Conduct was developed now 2 years ago by industry itself. So it was one of the actions that we had proposed in the Farm to Fork strategy. What the Commission did is we brought together the different stakeholders in the food ecosystem. And during 3 months, we discussed with them, organized a large number of sessions on what would be actually the common vision for the strategy, and where should the EU industry go and what could it do in the next 10 years to become more sustainable in general, to maintain this food security and this food affordability. And so this, and also the healthy, more healthy diets for the citizens. So this actually, all those actions are really coming from industry themselves. So what we wanted with this code of conduct is to be able to have on paper a common vision for the whole EU in agri-food industry, so that collectively all the actors will know in which direction to go. It's a collective path for all the actors. And so this is something which many big companies are already implementing. And so we see that for many big companies which have significant also human resources, experts who can identify how best to improve their resource efficiency, how to deploy new technologies, and we can eventually test on one production line and then extend it and make it more large. Clearly, all those big companies are doing it because they have the capacity to do it quite simply. But we see that for SMEs, it is much more a challenge to be able to implement this code of conduct, although this is, as I said, this is really the road ahead for the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem. So we thought it's important to help the SMEs also to go in the right direction, not to remain behind in terms of this sustainability transition. Also because many of the actions that I have already presented before, listed before in terms of the sustainability transition, actually are going to be a win-win for the companies if they dare to do the investments, because it means they're going to lower their cost base. it means they will also become more competitive. So that's why we think it is essential to also help the SMEs, which represent the very large majority of the agri-food companies, which actually produce about half of the food that is transformed. And so it's very important that those SMEs are also helped. And we know that then cluster organizations, but also other business support organizations are absolutely crucial. No. Next slide, please. So the objectives of the EU Code of Conduct, so on Western Food Business and Marketing Practices, I invite you, of course, to read it, are grouped in those 7 different big groups of aspirational objectives. So there's a few which we have not identified for support in this call, because it goes far beyond the collaboration that you will have actually between a few business organizations. So we have very much focused on the actions which can be actually implementable directly, locally, and where there is the strongest added value of collaboration between a number of different cluster organizations and, or in fine, between a number of different SMEs. Next slide, please. So what are we doing for helping also the implementation of this code of conduct in general? We are currently developing a tool which is going to be hosted on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, which is going to be presenting all the different actions of the code of conduct, making the link also with the existing best practices, green best practices, which are already in the corresponding database on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. You know that now we have also in each EN a sustainability advisor, which should be able to help companies which want to improve the sustainability in general. We are currently also devising a transition pathway, which might come up with additional support and ideas. And finally, so there is those agri-food sustainability cluster partnerships. So for those European agri-food sustainability cluster partnerships, we are building, so basically on cluster organizations. So next slide, please. So what we want to start with, to see that in the ECCP, on the cluster collaboration platform, we have already seen that there is a large number of agri-food clusters which are registered. Nevertheless, we realize that there are also some regions where there are only few of them, or where there are many other industrial sectors, but there's also many agri-food companies, but those are not necessarily collaborating together in an official cluster, which is registered on the cluster collaboration platform. Nevertheless, most areas, territories in the EU, where you have a significant industrial presence, you will have some form of business organization. So what do we want? The first thing is to actually enable more networking between different agri-food industry support organizations. So that's encompassing both cluster organizations, but also those other types of support and organizations which are supporting agri-food industry in the territories, which might have a different denomination. But the idea first is also to increase the networking between those. And so that is why we have asked that there's at least one the coordinator of the project should be registered and a cluster organization. But for the rest, we can also have other types of industry support organizations, because this is one of the important objectives of this project, is to enable the networking. The second objective is also to help upgrade the knowledge of the agri-food cluster organizations or industry support organizations in terms of what their SMEs, their companies can do to improve, to implement all the different objectives that I have introduced before. So that's why we have a number of actions in this call which enable this thing to actually help them to better support and to do this capacity building. So that is why also we have devised the core with a view that actually this expertise, which will be developed through the project, will not be something temporary or building, for example, on outside consultants, but will be something which is permanent, where we have really this knowledge and people which are already in those industry support organizations are there, develop their knowledge, and like that can continue beyond the duration of the project to actually help the companies. Next slide, please. So the 10 teams I have already introduced briefly before, but what is important is that you have to choose minimum one of those teams and maximum 3 teams. And that at least one of the teams should be about improving resource efficiency. Why? Because also we realize now that yes, resource efficiency has a direct, massive impact on the cost base of companies. And so we want to be able to also, to a certain extent, limit food inflation or counter food inflation through those projects. So this is the reason why there is this focus. And so at least one of the teams should be on resource efficiency. You have to choose minimum 1 and maximum 3 teams from the list. And know how to choose the teams. So the teams, to be sure that it's corresponding to the needs of the companies that you have. That's why we very strongly recommend to consult at least 50 SMEs per partnerships before determining the team. So that you actually see what are the needs of those companies, you ask them, and you try to understand where exactly it is that it could make more sense to actually support them in improving, in working, so that, and where it's not only, it will have a lot of impact, but it will also be doable. And I think the doability is something which you should very much keep in mind. Next slide, please. So the teams, so I repeat them to you. The first one is improving the nutrient composition and environmental footprint of food products, excuse me. So there we're thinking about, in general, anything which is going to make more healthy food for the citizens and also with the lesser environmental footprint. Everything which is relating to food waste, I mean, we have made huge progress on food waste, but there is still a lot of food waste. A lot of it is linked also to home storage and use. So any innovative solutions which will help that, are very, very important, because of course, the fact that there is food waste means that also there is, we need to produce more food, that there is, yes, so comparatively more demand compared to production, and so it also has an impact clearly on world markets. And we should not forget that for many prices for the commodities, food commodities, come from basically the adequation between offer and demand. Identifying anything which is relating to yes, the material efficiency of processes, raw materials which should be better valorized, also eventually by becoming a resource for another company. In general, many of those actually require some kind of collaboration between companies, and this is why also it's very important, and we want to have this facilitate and support this collaboration between different cluster organizations. Next slide, please. Reduce energy use and improve energy efficiency in general to the use of less energy intensive and low carbon technologies. So that's also it can start with very, very simple steps, but it can also sometimes those simple steps can be complex, and sometimes to identify the very best technology you need quite a lot of analysis and technological analysis, and that's why it's important that SMEs get supported in identifying the best technologies. Deploying also the renewable energy sources, improving water efficiency, already explained before, bioeconomy, and in general, then also the sustainability of food and drink packaging, which again will require collaboration between different companies. So now how to implement that? Next slide, please. So there are 8 activities which are mandatory. First, selecting the agri-food SMEs to be supported. So basically, to support those SMEs, first, as I said, we should identify the team. then preferably you should have all the different partners in the project should be in one subsector of the agri-food industrial ecosystem, so that there are synergies, because the whole idea is to try to have this collaboration between companies which have similar needs in terms of improving the sustainability in general of their processes and of what they produce and the healthiness of the food. And so therefore, it's important that there are those synergies and that they are preferably in one subsector. So you will have to select those agri-food SMEs. The idea is to have at least 100 SMEs which should be supported through each project. So that's they could be either in common or actually individually, depending on the potentialities. But as I said, the important thing is also to keep in mind it should be one subsector. So it's not going to be like a totally individual support to each of the 100 companies, which would be a lot of work actually. But the idea is to try to see between them exactly that they have different similar needs, not different needs, and so therefore to explore and also build on what the best practices are in one, which could be then deployed eventually in the other one. That is why the second activity is about the identification and presentation of pre-existing best practices. Because some of those companies can have already made investments recently and can have a best practice. And so it's important also that they share this best practice with the other companies, so that those other companies can see that indeed they can do the things, they produce in a different way, and use a different packaging, or they can actually improve the formulation of the product, and the consumers will still buy it and will like it. All those things are quite important, especially when you're talking to SMEs. And so this is why we think this pre-identification of best practices and then sharing them in the database of the cluster creation platform is very important to facilitate then the work, and to facilitate and convince the other SMEs to do similar improvements. The next is definition of a common strategic agenda for each project. So once you know what are the needs and of your companies, and you have identified the teams, so minimum 1, maximum 3 teams, I repeat, one of them having to be about resource efficiency, then you will, for each of the team, it can be on one, develop an agenda on the systemic transition in general of in your business support of the companies in your business support organizations which are in the project, and for the project, and then especially also on resource efficiency, as in any case one of the teams in minimum has to be resource efficiency. So how to deploy resource efficiency technologies. So on resource efficiency, so there it usually has to be made in a given area logically. So there, of course, it's going to be more about working locally, and eventually also reaching out to companies which might be not in the agri-food sector or in a different sector, but so that actually there is also eventually collaboration with other types of companies is totally doable for the purpose of enabling those local renewable energy investments. So the next activity is creating a network of agri-food technology centers. And so this is one element which is very important in the architecture of the core, is that among the legal entities and the consortium, there should be always at least one agri-food technology center. So we have checked before the situation across different agri-food cluster organizations in the EU. And we have seen that there's a lot of agri-food technology centers, which can be actually, in a university, it can be called a technology center. But anyway, organizations where there is really, which are technological organizations, and where there is this know-how and this very high-level technical expertise, and which are able then to support the identification, fine-tuning of technological needs, and the deployment of those technologies. So now we're asking also that those technology centers across the different projects work together. Why? Because nobody can be an expert on everything. And so we think that's also, if there is a networking again of those technology centers like that, they will be able to also have access to the expertise of the other agri-food technology centers. And so if there is a company which has a specific need on which they are not an expert, they will know, okay, there I have expertise, I will call upon them. And so this is why we also ask that, yes, each partnership organizes a conference, which will be online, that all the technology centers actually attend. And the conference of one partnership is organizing, each partnership is organizing one conference, but then all the technology centers of the other partnerships have to participate, so that also like that, they can hear, they can listen to what are the needs which have been identified in the inviting partnership, and so they can see if eventually they can help on those specific needs. We also would like to emphasize that it's important to invite, that they will be invited also all the green tech clusters, which are so in the European Cluster Cooperation Platform, to participate to those conferences, so that they can actually also see if there are some needs where they have the technology, and then they can reach out to the project and explain, look, we have the possibility to help you there, and we have some innovative technology which is or actually well demonstrated technology, which is really the solution for the issues that you have mentioned. So there, really the idea is to have experts and the networking of experts, but also at the same time already the possibility for the companies which can provide the technologies to see what are the needs, and again, to reach out to you and then to actually help also in finding some solutions. The fifth activity is about the appointment of green transition advisors in each agri-food cluster or industry support organization. As I mentioned before, we want actually to have long-term capacity building, and what we want with those projects is not to have just some help which is transitional by, for example, hiring an outside consultant to a few SMEs, but then after the project ends, there's nothing left. What we want is really that in your cluster or business support organization, the people who are already there through the project, they will develop, improve their capacity to actually help their companies to become more sustainable and to implement all those teams of the project. So this is why we ask that there is a green transition advisor, which is then identified, nominated in each of the industry support organizations or agri-food cluster in the project. And then this green transition advisor, which this person would already know the companies, and so that's also why we think it's important. So there would already be the trust between this person and the companies in which are in the region. So would then be the direct contact point with the SMEs. So we'll be able to then liaise with them and see what are their needs, and then for more specific knowledge and to know better for more technical issues, the green transition advisors would actually then work with the experts in the technology center of the partnership, which will be nominated for that purpose. So this is capacity building we're talking about, networking together, and really working on putting in place a system which will help to actually support SMEs to improve their sustainability over the long term. So that is the idea. Then in terms of how to support the companies. So in an ideal world, we thought that the best would be to develop some collective support actions. So that is to be able that for the SMEs, so at least 100 SMEs for each project, there would be actually some of them will have very similar needs, and so they could be grouped together. And then like that, the support, the identification of the technological needs, the definition of the global technical specifications could be done for this group of SMEs. They will be pulled together, and so it will be done for a group of SMEs for two reasons. First, because it facilitates and there's economies of scale in the identification of the best practices. It also, sorry, the best technologies of what is the most appropriate thing. So that's the first thing. Then actually it also helps them to eventually to have a better price, because if you're then doing common procurement and deploying similar technology across different companies, you will have definitely economies of scale. And then also because yes, as I started identifying the issues that we have seen, yes, also the SMEs do not necessarily have like very big companies, the same human resources and experts which are able then to there in the company to work and maintain, etc. And like that also later, if they have the similar technology, if one has a problem, they can call the other, and they can also support each other over the long term. So this really, that's why we thought it would be better eventually to be able to help them collectively. So now the idea with this project, with that, the steps which will be taken would be, yes, identifying the needs, pulling the companies together, defining the technical specifications, and then also reaching out, building on the possibilities that you have with the cluster collaboration platform, also to technology providers by actually posting on the CCP the global specifications, and which could be seen then by companies and the different non-food sector, which will be able to provide those technologies, among which are those green tech clusters. And then helping eventually, then once you have, yes, identify which are the best technologies, so discussing with SMEs among all the proposals that they have, which are the best technologies, that they could also be helped to launch a global procurement exercise so that it lowers the investment cost for those companies. So considering the timeline, we are fully aware that most probably the timeline of the project is not enough to actually enable in all companies the final deployment of those technologies. But it would be good also, and that's why we were talking about this, yes, capacity building and long-term approach. It would be important also that even after the duration of the project, yes, there is still a bit of support for those companies. So for the companies which are not grouped, we also asking them to provide individual support actions. So that's the seventh point, which eventually could then be slightly lighter in terms of yes, a very large scale, like the posting of the technological needs, etc. We are fully aware that if it's an individual company, it will, and you have to support, if you can support, let's say, among the 100 companies, if you can make 10 groups, let's say nine groups of 10 companies, and then you have 10 to support individually, clearly it's more doable than if you can only group 20 of them in 2 groups and you have 80 to support individually. So yes, yes, clearly there it would, but it's important at least as a strict minimum that for individual SMEs that help to identify their sustainability needs. So this is something which is very important. Then what is going to be important is to actually have the an exit strategy and to share then the experience of these projects. And so this is why now we actually are asking to after the end of the projects that among all the projects, so you will have at least 100 SMEs, and to identify the 25 best ones and to present them as best practices in the green transition support knowledge basis. So that's why we have this activity, which is communication of the results of the project. Next slide, please. To sum it up, the deliverables, which stem directly from what I have presented to you. So you have the catalog of the pre-existing best practices. So that's because, as we said, it's important in the very first phase to also look at what are the already technologies deployed and the best practices among companies or among big companies, so that actually it can serve as inspiration and it can actually encourage and demonstrate to the companies which are going to be helped to this project that this can be done and how to do it. Then you have at the end of the project the catalog of the best practices, the 25 best ones from the SME support. The conferences and the proceedings of the conferences. So as I explained, those conferences, the objective is to really have this connection between the different and the networking between the technology centers of the different projects, and also reaching out to the green technology clusters so that actually they can eventually then when they hear to the needs that the companies have in your clusters, so that they can see that eventually they have a solution to propose. So that's why we think those conferences, they really should be really very much already result oriented. The idea is to already say that's the needs, and so that what can you do there to assist us, either the other technology center to actually help in terms of this technological support, or the green tech. And so that's part of really the architecture of this concept. Is really that then through the conferences also it would facilitate your work, because then you would have already the green tech clusters eventually coming towards you and telling you, look, we have a solution for the problem that you have presented there. So it would also facilitate and limit the work that you have to do later in terms of reaching or trying to find a solution somewhere. And of course, there's a common strategic agenda. I mean, that is absolutely basis for the deployment of and the work which is going to be done on this team or teams that you will have selected with corresponding KPIs. And then a small fish at the end presenting for each SME what you have done and how you have supported. And then the progress reports. Next slide, please. So the smart KPIs that we are asking are directly stemming from what I have explained. Yes, since the first one of the first objectives is also increasing this network of agri-food business support organizations. So that's going to be also, yes, the networking between us, many of them. So we hope that through those projects in general, we will have much more agri-food business support organizations, which will eventually then become clusters and collaborating together. The number of investment projects, the number of SMEs benefiting directly or even indirectly, the number of SMEs signing the code of conduct, the number of additional agri-food support organizations on the SCCP, the number of pre-existing best practices, which will help in all the other projects, and the number of best practices coming from it. So if you have more than 25 results which you think are really great, you can of course and then provide more than 25 best practices. And I think that was it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elin and Diane, for the presentation. I think this was already a lot of information for you, giving you all the background, the rationale, so that you understand what we expect, where we are aiming to, and which type of projects we would like to see running under this call for proposal. In particular, I point out all the mandatory activities, deliverables, and KPIs that Elin and Diane has presented, because these have to be covered. So please keep this in mind in your proposals. I will take over now with my presentation, giving general information on the call for proposals. And after this one, we will have time to answer the questions you are submitting via Slido. I saw we have some questions already that came in. So please use the time also during my presentation to send us your questions. So I already presented myself. I'm the call coordinator for this call, not being alone on this, with a team of people and obviously colleagues from DG Grow being the masterminds behind this call. On this first slide, the information has been already presented by Elin and Diane. So just to quickly give you the background that you are not wondering when you go to the funding and tenders portal. You will find there all the information on the call, and you will see that we have had two corrigenda regarding to this call. One was an extension of deadline for submission, and another corrigendum has been published because of an increase of travel unit costs, which is relevant for you for your budget planning. So please use the latest call text that is appearing on the funding and tenders portal. You will see in my presentation, I've included many links to documents and websites for further information. So when the presentation is going to be published, you always have the possibility to get further, more detailed information on the different aspects by using the opportunity and clicking at these links that are included. The maximum grant per project is expected to be up to 1 million euro, which by pure mathematics makes 3 to 5 projects that will be financed under this call. The duration has been already mentioned, and on the funding and tenders portal, you can find all the relevant information, of course, the call text, but also the frequently asked questions. So, for instance, if we do not manage to answer all your questions today, we are going to screen them, and those that can be considered as frequently asked questions, meaning of interest to a wide number of participants, will be published also there. So go there and regularly and see the questions there. Next slide, please. On the indicative call timeline, so we have published on the 18th of July this call for proposals. The deadline for submission of the applications is the 7th November at 5 o'clock Central European Time. Please keep in mind this is an automatic deadline, so the system basically shuts down at 5 o'clock. This can be very frustrating if you do not manage for whatever technical issue or any other issue to respect this deadline, because your application will be ineligible. So please, an advice is really to prepare everything much before and submit also well before this deadline, so not to wait really last minute and maybe put everything at risk. Then we have foreseen to have the evaluation period, so immediately after the submission we are starting from November to January 2024, meaning that we will inform the projects about the outcome of the evaluation by end of January, beginning of February at the latest. We will start the grant preparation also in this moment. So between January and May, we will prepare the grants with the successful projects and sign those grant agreements. The projects are aiming to start around June 2024, and the implementation, as was mentioned already before, 30 to 36 months. There is a continuous reporting. These are the technical progress reports also that Elin Sidzhimov has mentioned on her slide with mandatory deliverables. The projects receive 50% pre-financing. There is an interim payment for the projects with additional funding according to the financial reporting that they will submit. And at the very end of the project, there is the payment of the balance, that another report with the payment of the balance. Indicatively, this final reporting and this final payment will take place between June 2027 and November 2027, according to the duration of the project. And you always need to count the time the projects have on their side after the end date of the implementation period to submit their so-called final periodic report, and also some time to assess this report. So this is a rough estimate of the final reporting and payment period, depending on the duration of the project you will choose. Next slide, please. So what is the process? There are several steps and several checks that we do, which are sometimes done in parallel. So we start with the admissibility check, which is a technical check, checking that your application has been submitted on time and has been submitted via the funding and tenders portal, so the submission platform that is prescribed and obligatory to be used. Also that the application is complete. There are all annexes and all parts have been submitted. Then those that are admissible continue with the eligibility check. There is important to know that there are two sets of eligibility rules that concern individual applicants, so each applicant organization, and eligibility rules for the entire the composition of the consortium, basically. Then there is a check of the exclusion criteria. So this relates to facts like bankruptcy, any types of breach of tax obligations, fraud, etc. So we are checking that your organization or the organizations that are part of your consortium are not in a situation of exclusion. I will explain also more on the different steps in my next slide. The next one is the capacity check, where we are checking the financial and the operational capacity to understand if the organizations individually and the consortium are in the position basically to implement the project, financially speaking, but also operationally speaking. And finally, there is the projects that make it through all those steps, arrive at the evaluation stage, where we are evaluating the award criteria that have been described also in the call text. And there is a ranking established with projects that are recommended for funding, those that are put on reserve list, and those that are rejected. On this slide, you can also see this email address I was already mentioning. This is the one where you can submit all your questions, basically, and that you have on the call, be it on the content or technical technical questions on the shape of the call. There will be at the end of the presentation information where you can submit questions if you have problems with the funding and tenders portal, which is another help desk for you. So next slide, please. Couple of informations about the different types of applicants and participants that are possible under this call. So we first have the beneficiaries, which are the classic partners in the project. Those receive the EU funding for executing the project, and they must be registered and validated in the participant register. We will have later on a thorough, more detailed presentation on how this works, so that you can make sure that everyone has fulfilled this requirement. What is also possible are affiliated entities. Those are organizations that are linked to one of the beneficiary. The affiliated entities do not sign themselves the grant agreement, but they also receive EU funding. So they also must be registered and validated in this participants register. Very important is to note that these affiliated entities do not count to the minimum eligibility criteria of the consortium, which I will present later. So the eligibility criteria are only and purely related to project beneficiaries. It's also possible to have associated partners, which are not recipients of EU funding, but they also must be registered. You can also use subcontractors for your project. Please make sure that for this that you use subcontractors only for a limited part of the activities. So it should not be the majority of activities that is performed by the subcontractors, and none of the core tasks should be like, for instance, project management should be done and performed by the subcontractors. Please indicate in the application form, justify the subcontractors, indicate for which tasks and which financial volume you intend to subcontract. And finally, subcontractors are third parties, so they are not beneficiaries or affiliated entities. These cannot be subcontractors. Final is the possibility to have third parties giving in-kind contributions, which are not formal recipients of your funding. So the proposals must be submitted by a consortium of applicants, where with this we mean the beneficiaries, not considering the affiliated entities. And one of the applicants must be appointed as coordinator of the consortium. So the coordinator is not only responsible for submitting now the application, but this is only our main contact throughout the entire project implementation, and basically the one where we turn to for any issues and related to the project. Next slide, please. So the admissibility requirements, so this is basically the technical requirements that you need to fulfill in order for your application to be further checked. As I was saying, you have to use the funding and tenders portal submission tool. Submit the application before the deadline of 7th of November at 5 o'clock Central European Time. The application must be readable, accessible, and printable. So you can upload only PDFs. You have to be very careful. For instance, there is one annex detailed budget table, which is an Excel template that needs to be transferred into PDF. And you should make sure and double check that all information really appears and that this switch to PDF has happened correctly and everything is really readable and visible there. The application must be complete. It consists of 2 parts. The first one is the part A. This is a part that is filled in online, and it contains administrative information about the participants, about the coordinator, the beneficiaries, and the affiliated entities, and also a summarized budget for the project. So this is everything filled in directly online. A second part is the part B, which is a template that you can download on the Funding and Tenders portal, and this part B is the technical description of the project. So when you download the template, you complete it and turn into PDF, re-upload, you should pay attention that there is a maximum of 50 pages for this annex, for this part B, that basically evaluators will not take into account any more than 50 pages. And this part B has 3 different annexes. So one is this detailed budget table that I just mentioned, the Excel form. The template, again, you have a link, for instance, here to see the template is available in the submission system. The next, what we consider an annex, but is actually or included in the part B form, is the list of previous key projects for the last 4 years. And finally, Annex 5, which is an eligibility checklist. This is available on our EISMEA webpage. So keep it in mind, don't forget Annex 5, because this is an annex that you don't get in the Funding and Tenders portal, but you have to get it from the EISMEA webpage. And again, you have to turn into PDF and upload in the field Other Annexes. The next slide, please. Yes, the electronic submission, as I was saying, via the Funding and Tenders portal, let me see what is the further information here. So the part A, just to give a bit more information. So there is what is required there is general information, a project proposals abstract, a declaration on behalf of all the consortium partners. As I was saying, the administrative data and a total overview, like a general overview of the budget of the proposal per partner. And in part B, so there is the technical description, maximum 50 pages, and annexes. Detailed budget table already there. Please make sure there is consistency between the budget you present under part A and in the detailed budget table. So these are two places where you are asked to present your budget. Make sure that this is consistent. Let me see. Yes, so all these elements have to be covered for your application to be complete. What is also important to mention is that the detailed budget table, you will see that there are, I think, 2 or 3 different templates available. Please take the template that at the end has in its name 90. So it's SMP-COSME-GFS 90. This is the correct template for the detailed budget table. Next slide, please. This is just a visualization where you have to upload part B and the annexes. As I was saying, part A is filled in online. So you also see in this little window on the top right that there are these different budget tables. So you take the one with the 90 in the name, and there is also the template for the application form part B here. Under other annexes, you upload the consortium eligibility checklist, so which is this Annex 5 that you can find on the EISMEA webpage. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is on the consortium eligibility checklist. It has 2 pages. The first page is the selection of themes, what Diane has already presented in her presentation. There are 10 themes. You have to select at least one, at least one, and maximum 3. And one of the teams have to be teams between 3 from teams number 3 to 8. Next slide, please. The eligibility checklist has also a second page where you have to list all the consortium applicants and indicate to which category of organizations they belong. Are they an agri-food cluster organization, agri-food technology center, or an industry support organization, with a yes or no information. So these 2 pages have to be turned into PDF. Don't forget this Annex 5. Get it from the EISMEA page. Next slide, please. So eligibility requirements related to individual applicants. So the individual applicants, here we refer to the beneficiaries and affiliated entities, must be legal entities, either public or private bodies, established in an eligible country, so in an EU member state, Ukraine, and countries participating in the single market program. There again, you have a link to a document which is listing all the countries that are currently participating. They have to be or represent either an agri-food cluster, an industry support organization, or agri-food technology center. So these are the 3 types of organizations that are eligible as applicants. Please note here that, as Diane was already mentioning, we are not targeting primary agricultural producers, neither the retail part, so we are in the middle of the value chain. So these are not eligible. As regards non-SMEs, so big organizations, they are encouraged to participate, in particular if they are officially members of the cluster organizations that are submitting the application. but they can only participate at their own cost. So as I was mentioning, the three types of organizations that can be applicants are agri-food cluster organizations, technology centers, and industry support organizations in the agri-food sector. Next slide, please. The eligibility requirements of applicants have to be have to be registered in the participant register. As I was mentioning, there will be a more detailed presentation on this later. Thank you. Next slide. Consortium. So the second set of eligibility criteria is connected to the consortium. So the consortia that are eligible, and here in the consortium eligibility, we speak only about beneficiaries, not the affiliated entities. So we would like to see minimum 4 legal entities from 3 different eligible countries. The coordinator of the consortium should be an agri-food cluster organization. In addition, there should be 2 other agri-food cluster organizations or industry support organizations, and at least 1 agri-food technology center. These are minimum requirements. So it's not that we want only consortia that are composed of 4 applicants, but this is minimum that is required in order for your consortium to be eligible. Next slide, please. So please also bear in mind the conditions related to multiple applications. So a coordinator cannot submit more than 1 proposal under this call. Multiple proposals from the same coordinator will be rejected. So all proposals, if it is the same coordinator, will be rejected, not eligible. The other applicants can participate in more than 1 proposal under the same call. But if the same applicant is participating in more than 1 of the proposals selected for funding, he will be asked to withdraw from the other proposals. And basically, he would eventually put in danger the eligibility of those other proposals, because the eligibility conditions must be respected throughout even the implementation of the project. So what I presented in the previous slide, the eligibility of consortia, these conditions have to be respected until the closure of the project. Next slide, please. Financial capacity. For details on this, you please go and check section 7 of the call document. So we also will have a presentation on this check. So this is to be sure that the applicants have sufficient and stable resources needed for the implementation of the project. This is a check that is carried out on the basis of the document that you submit, that you will be asked to submit once your proposal is actually chosen for funding. So you will be asked to submit different types of documents. I think these are examples, so it's not all of those documents that you need to provide. Profit and loss account, balance sheet, business plan for newly established organizations. This financial capacity check is done normally for all beneficiaries except for public bodies, and except if the beneficiary is requesting less than 60,000 euro grant. There is also a possibility to check your financial capacity. There is this kind of self-check simulator, which you can use for you to understand where you stand in terms of financial capacity. And it's very important that the coordinator has a sound financial capacity, because this can have implications on the payment arrangements in the project. Next slide, please. The operational capacity. So again, this is under section 7 of the project. With this, we mean the assessment of the know-how, the qualifications, and the resources that the applicants have put into the implementation of the project. This is to make sure that they are in the capacity to successfully implement it. The operational capacity is assessed under the award criterion of quality, where we look at the competencies, the experience of the applicants and their project teams, the staff profiles you are going to insert, the participant description, the list of previous projects, what has been mentioned before as being an annex. This is everything contributing to the positive assessment of your operational capacity. And finally, exclusion. So as I was saying, the exclusion criteria are mentioned in section 7 of the code text and relate to issues like bankruptcy or fraud. Next slide, please. This is just for you meant as a checklist so that you have all the key mandatory elements put together. Do not forget, please, the 8 mandatory activities that need to be covered. All of them need to be covered. The choice of teams, as was mentioned, so choose between 1 and 3 teams, with one of the teams being from teams number 3 to 8. Mandatory indicators all need to be covered, and mandatory deliverables. So this is the minimum your application needs to present. Next slide, please. The evaluation procedure. So when your proposal passes the admissibility eligibility check, you will advance to the evaluation of your proposal, which is based on award criteria, which are outlined in detail also in the code text. The evaluation procedure is carried out by an evaluation committee, which is assisted by independent external experts. And the final stage of the evaluation, the evaluation committee approves a ranking of all the eligible proposals. Each application is assessed by 3 external experts, all of the applicants that are going to be informed in so-called evaluation result letter about the outcomes of the evaluation at the end of the evaluation period. So as I was saying, this should happen end of January, maybe beginning of February, but this is in principle the planning. The successful proposals are then invited to prepare and sign the grant agreement. So this is the so-called GAP, the grant agreement preparation process. And the others will be either put on reserve list or rejected. The reserve list is there for in cases, for instance, that the grant agreement cannot be signed for whatever reason with projects that have been selected for funding, or if by chance the call budget, the total call budget sometimes can be topped up by additional funding. So there is a chance to finance some projects from the reserve list. Next slide, please. Award criteria. So there are 3 award criteria. They are described in the code text. First, it's very important that you analyze these elements very thoroughly, also in having a look at the code text, because this is what your application is going to be assessed against. So you should make sure that you address all of those criteria and that you tick all these boxes. So the first one is the relevance. So this is a kind of also a policy background. So how clear is your proposal, and how consistently are the objectives described? To what extent does your application match with the core priorities and objectives? How do you contribute to the EU legislative context and strategic context? So this is these kind of questions. The second is the criterion on quality, which is subdivided into 2 subcategories. First, on project design and implementation. So what is the technical quality of the proposal? How well is the methodology explained? Is there a sound methodology? How effective is the work plan? Is it feasible in the time frame you propose? Is it cost effective? And how clear is the rationale between the choices and the activities you are proposing? And the second sub part under the quality criterion is on the project team and cooperation arrangements. So this is about the quality of the consortium and the team that is going to run the project. About the partner roles and partner contribution, the distribution of tasks, the procedures, the problem-solving mechanisms. So how did you plan these things? And the final criterion is the impact. So is this, how ambitious is your action? How credible is it is that you reach this envisaged impact? What are the long-term results and long-term impact of your project on the target groups? The dissemination strategy you are putting in place, the sustainability of the project, and the relevant KPIs that you are proposing. So for each of these criterion, you get a certain maximum number of points in total. A proposal can get 100 points maximum. There are two thresholds that need to be reached in order to be at all considered for funding or included in the ranking of projects that potentially could be funded. So you have to reach a minimum 70 points in total. And for each criterion, you need more than half of the points. So under relevance, you need minimum 16 points, quality also 16, in both subcategories, and under impact you need minimum 6 points. So if you fail to reach either the minimum threshold under a specific criterion or the minimum overall threshold, your application will not be considered in the list for funding or in the reserve list. So it will be rejected basically at this stage. Next slide, please. Some tips and tricks. So this is to round up my presentation. Very obvious, but in practice sometimes forgotten, that all this information is described and in the call document. So you should really read it carefully, because this is the basis. This gives you an idea on what we expect and what is evaluated, how and what is expected. So this is a very important source of information. So are the FAQs, which are also published on the Funding and Tenders portal. There also you can prepare the templates and all the annexes in advance. So this is something that you should keep in mind. Yes, think and write like an evaluator. So put yourself in the shoes of the evaluator, focus and address all the award criteria. So because this is what you will be assessed on. And this is basically also the essence of your success. So it's important that you keep this in mind. Structure the information. Keep in mind that you have 50 pages limit. So be specific, don't remain vague or unclear, stay in scope, use quantification and clear presentation of the work and tasks. Be consistent in the proposal, as I was saying, between the budgets, for instance, just to give you an example, if even division of roles and the budget, if you decide on a certain division of roles in the consortium, this has to be mirrored in the budget. Same in the indicators and the activities. So there are many places you have to really pay attention to be very consistent, yeah. Write in a reader-friendly manner. Avoid long sentences, descriptions, and abbreviations. Yes. Next point on the slide is that you should try to make your project to describe well what makes your project special, what is the idea? What do you tackle? What is your, let's say, unique standout point that you would like to take? Your specific contribution. Check the completeness. So remember the annexes. I already mentioned several times. The Annex 5, not to be forgotten, the one on the EISMEA call webpage, and submit earlier. Do not wait last minute in order to maybe put everything to risk. Next one. Next slide, please. Thank you. The detailed and complete budget. Please note that the budget annex is very long and very detailed. So plan enough time to complete this annex. It requires really some work. So don't underestimate, for instance, this detailed budget. The budget must reflect the deliverables, the activities, the description of the proposal. If you are planning trips, they should appear in the budget. And it should be really consistent. If any type of activity is subcontracting, it has to be also, of course, included in the budget. Under this call, there is a financial support to third parties that is not obligatory, but it's possible to support travel and accommodation of your SMEs. This is there is no requirement, and it's just the possibility to include this. Prepare a cost-effective budget. So all the items must be necessary for project execution. So it means that whatever you include in the budget, you have to explain in the part B why is this necessary. So it needs to be clear. Otherwise, this will be noted in the evaluation. Clearly describe the division of tasks and responsibilities between partners in the consortium. Why certain partner is taking over certain tasks. How are you making sure that everyone is participating, everybody, the division of tasks is well balanced, etc. So there can be different rationale, but please explain it well in your application. Remember that you will need to execute these in practice. What is evaluated and what is approved for funding cannot be changed. So in the grant agreement preparation, there are only some technical fine-tuning possible. So whatever you submit as a proposal will need to be put in practice, executed in practice. And the success is to set ambitious but realistic goals. So you need to find the right balance between being ambitious, proposing somewhere where the evaluators see that, yes, this project can have an impact on the main target group, which are the SMEs. And at the same time, it has to be realistic. So it doesn't help if you let's say exaggerate, or if it's not clear how with these activities you can reach unrealistic goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my final slide. Here I include some information on the possibilities to find partners. So there is on the Funding and Tenders portal a partner search database which you can consult. There is also a database of the Enterprise Europe network. You have all the links included here. Last but not least, there is the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, where also you have the opportunity to find other clusters, other organizations in the agri-food ecosystem. So include the partners only upon their consent, obviously, but you need a strong commitment of your partnership for the project from the very beginning on, and consult experienced or former applicants. For any type for support, there are different places where you can turn according to the issue you are facing or the question you would have. So there is the IT help desk. anything that is related to passwords, access rights and roles, the technical aspect of the submission of the proposal. You have the telephone number and the email address here. There is an online manual for applying via the funding and tenders portal, where all these steps are also included. And finally, as I already mentioned before, there is this what we call functional mailbox, where you can submit your questions on the call. So everything that is not IT related. The questions can be sent until the 31st October, which is 5 working days before the deadline of the call. And all those questions will be treated and published in the FAQ section of the funding and tenders portal. Thank you very much. So with this, I close my presentation, and we would now have a couple of minutes to take your questions. In case your question is not in this first round of questions, stay with us, and we are going to have a second round of questions, and where we will pick it up. Maybe these questions that we are going to take now will be on the 2 presentations you just heard. So maybe Elin, Diane, if you can switch on your camera like this, the 2 of us are ready to reply. And let's start. Thank you for displaying the questions we have received via Slido. First question, could you explain the details for participation of organizations from Ukraine? I can take this one, Elin, Diane. This is easy. Ukraine is eligible under the single market program. So the conditions for eligibility are the same as for instance, the EU member states and the other countries participating under SMPs. So the conditions are those that I explained on my slides. So the type of organization, the legal entity, etc. All these applies also from organizations from Ukraine. So I hope this is clear. Do you have an overview of consortia planning to submit proposals for this call, and how can we get in touch with them? And no, I mean, we just have a very limited overview on who has accessed the system, basically. So on our side, we cannot share this type of information. How to find partners, I've presented on one of my slides. So please use these channels. What you can also do is on the CCP, I was also saying there is a mapping, so you can see all the organizations in the agri-food ecosystem. You can filter. You can also see, for instance, previous projects under the agri-food sector or running projects under the single market program. In this respect, I would advise you, for instance, to check the Euro clusters. We have 3 Euro clusters that are on agri-food, so which have a consortia from this sector. But yes, so these are the ideas for partner search we can put forward. Elin, Diane, do you have any further tips? Okay, so that would be for that one. Who can participate? Big companies are allowed to participate. So I mentioned this, that indeed they are encouraged to participate, and we see a high added value, but they cannot receive EU funding. So our target group are the 3 types of organizations: the cluster organizations, the business support organizations in general, and the 3rd one is the technology center. Elin, Diane, you tell me if you want to add.
If I can complete on this
Please.
one, yes.
Yes.
So as I mentioned, it's important that, because normally in a given area you will have bigger companies in the agri-food sector and smaller ones. So the objective with this call is to actually help the SMEs, because as I mentioned to start with, we realize that it's far more difficult for them to actually find the appropriate technological solutions and to analyze how to deploy it, etc. The whole process is much more complicated for them because they don't have the same scale, don't have the same human resources. No, if there are big companies in your cluster which are willing to also participate in terms of sharing their best practices, and that is something also which is very much encouraged in one of the activities, I think it's in activity number 2, or which are willing to then also share the experience and eventually provide a bit of technological support to the SMEs eventually, which might be, for example, their subcontractors, that is very much encouraged. So, but the objective is, yes, to help the SMEs. Realize it's difficult for the SMEs, and so that's why there's not going to be any financial support for big companies. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Ellen Diane. For completing, now next one, could you give some examples of what you mean by agri-food industry support organizations? So for all 3 types of organizations, we have included a definition in the whole text. And so maybe just to give you the definition, and then Ellen Diane, if you want to add anything, please feel free. So the industry support organizations are business or technical support organizations with the operational capacity to directly support a large number of agri-food companies in their geographical areas. I don't know, Ellen Diane, do you think this needs
Yes,
some...
so I think it can be any type of business support organization. So what we saw, and the motivation also be behind the fact that we include those industry support organizations and not only clusters, is that we see that there are some agri-food industry support organizations which are labeled as clusters, which are registered on the cluster cooperation platform, but there are probably quite a lot of them which could have a different denomination, are not officially calling themselves a cluster, but nevertheless are helping the companies in their area to actually innovate better and etc. So it could be a chamber of commerce, it could be any type of really industry support organization, as long as it is serving on a significant number of agri-food SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen Diane. Maybe we take, yes, the last 2. Are the companies from Republic of Moldova eligible? I think we will keep this question maybe for the end. I'm going to check the list. I think I have to remember that yes, but I do not have all the countries present for the moment. So we will come back to this question. And last one, what is the minimum required ratio of co-investment from the beneficiary? So the co-financing is 90% of the total budget that you are going to present. So you, from our side, you receive 90%, 10% is the co-investment that you need to provide on the side of the applicants. I hope that this answered the question. 100% is for the financial support to third parties. So only this very little, if you choose this option to provide funds for SMEs for their travel, this will be reimbursed 100%. Otherwise, all the other expenses for the applicants or at the applicants level remain at 90% co-financing from our side. Okay, thank you very much. So this was the first question and answer session. Thank you, Ellen Diane. Please stay with us, because at the very end we will have another question and answer session where questions also could pop up that are still related to your presentation. And now I pass the word to Elin Sidzhimov from the Research Executive Agency, who is working as legal and financial advisor in the validation planning team. And he will present to you the process of registration and validation of participants. Thank you very much, Elin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martina, and good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Elin Sidzhimov, and I work in the Central Validation Service, in fact, as a validation correspondent. And today, on the next slide, you will see the outline of a short presentation that is directed to you in order to briefly explain what is the registration process, what does REA Central Validation Service do, the main communication channel with the central validation service. And at the end, there are several links with guidance documents that you can access once you receive the presentation. So let's start with the first part, which is the registration of your organization. On this slide, you see a print screen from the Funding and Tenders portal, which actually shows you two different scenarios. One, on the left-hand side, you see that you have the option to search for a PIC number, because in many cases, an organization might already have a PIC number, whether it's valid or just registered. And if you cannot find your organization in the portal, then it means that you need to do a new registration, the one that you see on the right-hand side. On the next slide, you will see what is the how does it look when you start the registration of when you haven't found your organization and you start registering it from scratch. Can you please go to the next slide? Yes, so it's a simple process that it's done via a step-by-step wizard, so-called. It starts with first the system performs additional duplication check to see whether, according to the legal name and the VAT number and registration number, there is already a registered entity. And if there isn't, you can continue by adding your the data of your organization, all the legal information. You add the additional authorized users that might be can have access to this PIC number at this registration stage. And once all this is done, the registration is completed and you receive a PIC number, which is participant identification code, in a declared status. So this is the status before it's being validated. With this participant identification code, now you can submit your proposal. So we are ready to go to the next slide. So this is actually once you have submitted your proposal, you don't need to have a valid PIC number for that. And the REA role starts once the PIC is created, and we have received a request to validate this PIC number from the operational services that are managing the call. And you can see on this time scale, the second part is verification and validation of legal data, which the REA Central Validation Service performs, and it's based on the legal documents that we have requested from you and you have uploaded in the portal. But let's first see on the next slide what is the REA role, what are our responsibilities in general. So as already mentioned, we perform the legal validation. This means we verify the legal existence and the legal status of your entity. So we need to see in the documents that you have submitted that in fact the legal entity is currently existing and under what legal form, whether it's a private company, some kind of association or a public body. We are also responsible for the appointment of the legal entity appointed representative, the so-called LEAR. If any legal changes occur after the PIC is validated, we are also responsible for these modifications. I mean, for the validation of these modifications. We also performs the universal transfer of rights and obligations. So if one entity is absorbed by another, let's say, and the first one ceases to exist, we do perform this change in the system. We are creating the legal entity and bank account files, prepare the financial capacity assessments when it's necessary, ownership control analysis, or the SME and mid-cap checks. But these are not going to, I'm not going to go into details right now because it's a different focus of our presentation. On the next slide, Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As already mentioned about the legal validation, the data that you have introduced in the portal in the beginning when you registered your PIC, we are going to verify this data and to to make your PIC number into a valid status. You need this valid status in order to be able to sign a grant agreement or a contract. The legal validation, what is its advantages to be centralized in the single electronic data interchange area? It's because it's done only once. When you first need to sign your first grant agreement or a contract. Once the validation is performed, it's going to be reused for future participations, and we intervene only if some changes occur. So we need to validate these changes. Yes. Thank you. The validation is it's a harmonized process. It's the same for all the participants, and it's performed on the basis of the supporting documents that we request from you and you submit. And we perform the validation in accordance with the EU financial regulation and the rules of legal entity validation, LEAR appointment, and financial capacity assessment. These are publicly available in case you want to get familiar with them. The validation is required for all the beneficiaries and affiliated entities, and the PICs of affiliated entities are frequently included in the consortium during the GAP, but they must be introduced in the Funding and Tenders Portal Grant Management Service System. So now I'm going to show you what are the actual legal documents that you are going to be requested. The first one is the legal entity form, which is a template that is generated by the system. You just need to download it, fill it in, date it, stamp it, and sign it, and then re-upload it in the system. The VAT extract should be a recent one, so not older than 6 months. And if your entity is not registered for VAT, we would need to receive a proof of VAT exemption. The same rule for being a recent document applies to the registration extract. So we need to establish whether the entity is currently existing, so not older than 6 months for private bodies. The registration extract is requested for private bodies, whereas for public bodies, the law, decree, or decision with which the entity is created and under which it functions needs to be uploaded. For international organization, this is the treaty with which it has been established. And for non-profit organization, we need to receive the statutes, because this is the document where the non-for-profit status it's established. That's where it's explained that the profit cannot be distributed. If the bank account validation is necessary, we also request the financial identification form. On this slide, you see a print screen from what our communication looks like. The person who registered the PIC number, or the self-registrant, receives firstly a notification per email with our message. But to be able to communicate with us, they need to log in the portal and use the messaging function there. To send us any messages. This is I strongly encourage everyone to try to communicate with the Central Validation Service only through this channel, because like that your message reaches directly the person who is dealing with your case, with the validation of your entity. We can go now on the next slide. I will here touch upon two scenarios when you have a PIC number which you don't have access to. So the first example would be when we have a PIC in a declared status. So the PIC is registered in the portal, but it hasn't been validated yet. So a proposal has been submitted, but you don't have access to this PIC. For some reason, the person who registered the PIC, the self-registrant, might have left the organization, and now nobody has access to this PIC number. In this first scenario, the solution is to register a new PIC, to create a new PIC in the portal, and then to communicate it to us. Then in this way, we will link both PICs, the newly created one and the old one. This will transfer the application to the new one that you have access to, and then we can proceed with the validation. The second scenario is if you lose access to a valid PIC. This means that the appointed leader, for example, it's not available anymore, and there are no appointed account administrators that can enter in the PIC. For that, there is the so-called lear recovery procedure. It's again a simple step-by-step wizard that you follow, and you appoint a new lear, and in this way you re-establish the access to your PIC number. On this last slide, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have provided you with some useful guidance which will help you and probably answer some of your questions that might arise. And with this, my presentation is finished. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I will answer them in the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Elin, for the presentation. We will immediately
Martina.
Go to the next one. We have a presentation of my colleague from EISMEA, Ainhoa Pardo Elordi, Financial Officer, who will explain all the financial provisions of this call for proposal. Ainhoa, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Do you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we hear you well.
Perfect. So we can go ahead. So first of all, I would just like to remind you that the proposals must be submitted electronically, you know, via the funding and tenders portal, electronic submission, and that the paper submission, as you know, they are not possible. Those proposals, including the annexes and the supporting documents, they must be submitted using the forms provided inside the submission system. The proposals must be complete and they must contain all the requested information and all required annexes and supporting documents, and those related to finances, which are the application form, Part A, the summarized budget for the project to be filling directly online, and the application form, Part B, which is the detailed budget table calculator, and the template is available in the submission system. Please, next. For the for the instructions related to the detailed budget table, which is the part we are going to be a bit more extensively. First of all, you will see that there are different tabs. The first tab is related to the introduction pages, and they do not have to be submitted. And the second one is the start, where you will have some information to fill it in, but you will not have to submit. You will have to submit the sheets number 3, number 4, and number 5. You will have to complete one detailed budget table per each member or affiliated entity. And if there are no costs in one of the categories, that's fine. You leave the box empty, and that's not a problem at all. Next, please. So for this detailed budget table, please be assured that, as I told you, one detailed budget table per member or affiliated entity, that you must only provide the costs that are eligible, that you have to list each item only once, that the list of each cost has to be in the working package section, and that you have to use your best estimates. We know that at the submission grant, you don't know exactly, but you need to be the most accurate possible. Just for you to know, practically in the white cells, it's the data that you have to enter, and the blue cells are the data that are auto-calculated. Next, please. Related to the consolidated table per participant, which you will have more towards the end, that will show the different cost heading per work package. And after you enter correctly the data in the detailed budget table, this table is automatically calculated by the system. So it will appear there at the end, but it's also important that you revise it and that you see that all the data that you have put before, it's there correctly, but that should be the case. Next. Then there will also be the consolidated table, and that will be per project, and that table will show the cost per work package per participant. That table, on the opposite that the other one, will have to be manually filled in by the coordinator, and the financial data enter and automatically calculated in the other tables. Next, please. Now we are going to go on the categories that you are going to have on this detailed budget table. We have on the one side, which is mainly the part you will have, it's the project cost, and then those costs, there will be personal cost, there will be subcontracting cost, there will be purchase cost, other categories, and indirect cost. We will go through it one by one, don't worry. And then you might have the part that also of project income with the EON contribution, revenues and contribution by third parties, and also the own resources. Next, please. Related to the personal cost, there are 4 categories: employees, natural persons under a direct contract, seconded persons, and SME owners without a salary. Next one. So for the cost of the employees of equivalent, it has to be eligible personnel, which is people with an employment contract or equivalent with the beneficiary, and those people have to be assigned to the action. The eligible costs are the salaries, the social security, contribution, taxes, and other costs that are linked to the remuneration of that employee. And the non-eligible costs are the bonuses, dividends, and other type of related expenses. The calculation must be presented in monthly rates for each person who will work in the action. And the maximum working days that can be declared per year are 215 days. Next, please. Then, for the cost of natural and seconded persons, the seconded persons by a third party plus against payment. Natural persons have to be under direct contract, but not employment, and they could be civil, freelance, or expert. And they are eligible if they work under conditions that are similar to the ones as employees, like they do tasks like supervision of, they have office presence, or this type of, as if it was an employee. And the costs are not significantly different from those performing a similar task as personnel. The work results will belong to the beneficiary, and the cost declared amounts solely to remuneration plus taxation cost for the person in question. For the cost for SME owners and natural persons, the SME owners and natural persons are eligible if they are owners or co-owners and a beneficiary of the actions, and SMEs not receiving a salary. And for the calculation of the cost, there is a specific method, which is the unit cost. It's a daily rate multiplied by the number of days equivalents work on the action. And there is a commission decision with those unit costs, and you will need to follow it. There you have an overview of what it will appear in your detailed budget table related to the personnel cost. You will see that you have your work package. You will see that you have the different categories that I just went through. You will have the options to change the task of the personnel, and then you will have to put the rate, the amount, the time, and also if they are working in other work packages or only exclusively in the one that you are filling in. And then we will also need a small description on the task. A couple of lines, normally it's enough. Next, please. For the subcontracting cost, the subcontracting costs are those costs that are purchases of goods, works, or services related to project tasks. They are autonomous. There is no direct supervision by the beneficiary as opposed to the in-house consultants. And subcontracting costs, they are allowed, but under following conditions. They cannot be core tasks, specific tasks to the action. They have to be performed by third parties, not a consortium or an affiliated entity. They have to be described in the Annex 1. They have to be budgeted in Annex 2 or ex post approved. And if they go above of the 30% of the total cost, they must be justified in the application. And they can be declared only as actual cost incurred. Next, please. For the purchases cost is those services, works, or good that they do not cover the implementation of action task, but that they are necessary to carry out the action. They do not fall in any of the other categories, and they do not have to be indicated in Annex 1. And there are 3 subcategories: travel and subsistence, equipment, and other goods and services, but we will focus on the 2 that will be relevant for you: travel and subsistence and equipment. So for travel, accommodation, and subsistence, the eligibility rules is that they have to be only for the personnel working on the action, and they have to be justified. They have to be necessary under the action, and the calculation provided in the description column. It's very important that they have to be budgeted as unit cost, which is a prefix amount. There has been a revision on the Commission decision just at the end of July with new rates. You will find in this Commission decision that there are rates for traveling part, which can be by air, by land, by land I mean by train, or by normally by car. You will have rates for the distance man by rail and by train and by air. You will also have the cost when it's between different member states or when it is within the same member state. You will also see a table in the Commission decision with the different countries and also the accommodation rates and the subsistence rates. And what is not indicated in the Commission decision can be done as actual cost. For example, the trips of less than 50 kilometers by car. So there are some exceptions where you will be able to use actual cost, but the vast majority will be provided in unit cost because will be under this Commission decision. Please, next. So you see there on the table an example, and you will see that for every destination, you will have to fill it in the 3 parts on travel, accommodation, and subsistence. So there might be the option that you will need to add more more lines below if you have more than the trips that are already preset in the detailed budget table, but that should be possible. That's not a problem. Next, please. Then for the equipment, the equipment that it's eligible, it's the one that it's new, but can also be second-hand, and on renting and leasing, it's also possible. The basic rule of the cost for the equipment is via depreciation and corresponds to the duration of the action plus the rate of the actual use for the action. And it has to be recorded in the assets registers or in the usual practices of the beneficiary. Next, please. So as my colleague mentioned, there is also the possibility to report expenses on financial support to third parties. They must be a maximum of 20% of the grant. They will be reimbursed at 100% of the cost incurred. The maximum amount per third party is 60,000 euros. They cannot be provided through services of a consortium member or an affiliated entity. The intended purposes plus the eligible channels listed in the call document are in the pages between 13 and 15. And they have to be elaborated in detail in the proposal, the objectives, conditions, modality, and so on. And the principle of transparency must be applied, no conflict of interest, criteria predefined, and so on. Next, please. Now we're going to go to the last part of the detailed budget table with the indirect cost. The indirect costs are running or operating costs. They are costs that are not directly linked to the action in implementation and not to be attributed directly to it. They are reimbursed at a flat rate of 7% of the eligible direct cost. Indirect costs are automatically calculated by the IT system, applying this rate of 70% to the sum of the eligible cost. And those costs are normally costs that include stationery, rent of the office, utility, phone calls, and so on. And there is no need to provide a breakdown of the cost. Next, please. I would also like to mention some specific cost eligibility, like the VAT. Non-deductible VAT is eligible, but is not eligible if refunded by acting public authority. Regarding kickoff meetings, they are eligible. They can be declared as cost, but only if the meeting takes place after the project starting date. If they are before, they will not be eligible. Then regarding project websites, communication cost, they are eligible, and the cost or separate project websites, they are not eligible. And in-kind contributions, they are eligible, but only if cost neutral. Next, please. Related to till now we have been seeing the project cost, expenses, and now we're going to see the project income. There is the EU contribution, the grant, it's 100% for financial support to third parties and 90% for all other cost categories. Related to the revenues and contributions by third parties, income generated by the actions such as direct revenues or receipts, like conference participant fees, sales of books, but no profit rules. Grants may not give a profit, and this will be checked by us at the end of the project. So please take this into account. And in kind for free contributions from third parties cannot be declared as cost. Own resources or the own contribution of the beneficiary have also to be put in there if it's the case. And that's all from my side. I hope you got a bit of more details on how to fill in these tables. They can be a bit overwhelming at the beginning, but all the information is there. Read very carefully the instructions, and it should be fine. Might tricky at the beginning, but it should be fine for all of you to fill in them properly. Thank you very much for your attention, and just let me know if you have any question.
Thank you, Ainhoa, for the presentation, and thank you, Elin. So we have finished with the presentations now and have time for your questions that you have submitted via Slido. We are a bit ahead of time, so I think this will give us the possibility to reply really to all the questions we have received. Thank you for displaying them. So let's start with the first one. I'm afraid it could be a problem with an audit of Ukrainian potential applicants. Are qualified EC auditors present in Ukraine? I would maybe like to pass this to Ainhoa. Ainhoa, maybe if you can turn on your camera, just to explain what are the requirements in terms of auditing expenses, etc.
Okay, so well, first of all, I don't think I mentioned it on the detailed budget table, but when one of the beneficiaries requests more than 325,000, there are expenses. Yeah, it's 325,000 euros, right? I think. Then audit expenses can be declared and can be requested. Normally, the audits, they are not, I mean, not everyone will go through an audit. The audit is something that might happen or not. And if I'm honest, I don't think it's any problem for Ukraine, but I'm not completely sure. I don't know if you can help me with this.
I think there are two things. So first, in this specific call, there will be no beneficiary with over 300,000 euro because we were mentioning the total budget of the project. So it's a bit unrealistic to have this, let's say. Yeah. So from our side, we are not obliging beneficiaries that have a grant that is less than this to submit to us audited expenses. On our side, we can conduct an audit to Ukrainian beneficiaries as well as to other beneficiaries. I don't have any information that this could be more difficult for Ukraine. So I think if you are subject to an audit, this should be performed under the same condition that for other countries.
Yeah, we are actually working in grants where there are Ukrainian participants, and that's being carrying on without any problem. Yes. So in principle, it should not stop.
Yes, but in principle, you are lucky and you will have no audit. Which, let's hope for this, but there should be no issues with this. And on your side, you are not, if you stay below this threshold that I know I was mentioning was 325,000 of EU grant received per organization, per applicant, you are not obliged to audit your expenditure. So you don't have to foresee costs for audit in such case. Yeah. Unless you go over this threshold, and then in that case, indeed, you would have to provide the expenditures, let's say the cost statements audited. But
yeah, it should. Yeah, it will probably not the case. That's why I also didn't mention it, because not to confuse more.
Yes. Maybe next question. Are there any expectations, minimum or maximum, regarding the proportion of the budget devoted to third-party support? So the answer is no, because in this call, third-party support is optional. So this is not an obligatory element. So there are no expectations on this point. Indeed, it should, seeing the mandatory activities, play a minor role. So we would expect not to see a high proportion of costs going to financial support to third parties, but there are no guidelines on this that are set. The costs that will be reimbursed are at 100% for financial support to third parties. And these are allowed for reimbursement of actual costs or lump sum of travel, accommodation, and subsistence costs. Yes, that's it, I think. So that answers your question. No, we don't put any rules on this, but we, meaning also that we don't see this as an obligatory and major core element of the proposals. So if you deem that this is necessary, please justify, and please bear in mind this condition that this is for the travel and subsistence of your SMEs.
If I just may add,
Yes.
sorry for the financial support to third parties, as I mentioned during the presentation, it should not be more than a 20% of the grant, because I think she was asking about the proportion. So maybe
yes,
that.
but yeah, indeed.
But exactly, that's the very
been
maximum,
higher.
because they don't even have to provide it if it's not the case. So yeah.
Yes, no, maybe in other calls they have a focus on this, but not under this call.
Exactly.
So indeed, this is we don't have any further instructions on this. Next one. Do you plan to have similar same call next year? It's a very interesting opportunity, but deadline is quite challenging. So we work on the basis of annual work plans, and that's why you will have to consult the work plan for the year 2024. This call is running under the 2023 work plan of the agency, so I cannot give more indication on this. I don't know if Helene, you have any information in addition. But basically, this is the principle. So for the moment, this is the call that it has been agreed, and it's say.
So next year, it is not foreseen to have a similar call. No, I can answer to that.
Okay, next question, please. So we are back with the Republic of Moldova. I checked, and the good news is that Moldova is fully eligible because they have signed on the 8th of September the agreement to participate in the single market program. So Moldovan, again, the question is, are companies from Republic of Moldova eligible? Sorry to be precise. So the place of origin, indeed, Republic of Moldova is eligible. However, the applicants in this call that are eligible are clusters, industry support organization, and technology centers. So please make sure to keep this in mind in your consortium. Next question. Is it mandatory to have companies, partners for applying, or as a single company, it's possible to be eligible too? So this is basically what I just mentioned before. So in order to be eligible, you have to fall into the 3 categories. So we are basically targeting intermediaries in order to have impact on companies, but eligible organizations, clusters, industry support organizations, and technology centers. Next question. Is an aquaponic project set up building of plants plus create an hub for science industry as a whole? I think this is about a project idea. So this is the type of very concrete questions that are actually going to be evaluated in the evaluation stage. To see if your project is relevant, you have to fit with your within the 10 themes that have been presented. But I suppose that also in your field of work, these themes are covered. So, Helene, do you want to say something on this one? But
yes. So from
we
what
we cannot give a definite yes or no here. So this is not
from what I read, so from what I read, there are already some things like building of plans. So the project is about networking different business support organizations and helping SMEs to identify agri-food SMEs, to identify where they can improve, so existing SMEs. So I think you have to really look at the philosophy of the call and see to what extent what you have in mind is corresponding to the philosophy of the call. Yes. From what I read, this seems a bit far-fetched.
Yes, out of scope, let's say, of this call. What if the project is already started in October 23, January 24? This is not quite clear either, I must say, because indeed, I mean, this call has a specific purpose, is aiming at specific consortia, and has a specific set of activities that is also set around cooperating even between the projects. So it cannot, we are not financing something that is already ongoing. All these activities are supposed to start, as I was saying, in June 2024. So we are not providing funding for a running project that it doesn't fit the call's objectives. So maybe the next one, could you repeat again, please, the categories in which a company should fall in order to be eligible to a single application? So the categories of eligible applicants are the clusters, also agri-food clusters, agri-food business support organizations, and technology centers working in that domain. So these are the three, let's say, intermediaries that we target in this call. And via these intermediaries, we aim to have impact on SMEs. As Helene was explaining, with the paradigm that SMEs need support in order to be more sustainable in the agri-food domain. I think that was the last question. I can also check quickly on Slido, but I see that that was it. We are slightly ahead of time. But with this, I will close this information webinar and thank all the participants for taking the time, the interest in the call. I wish you all the best of luck and for the preparation of your proposals. I would also like to thank all the speakers for very comprehensive, clear presentations covering really the main points that are important for your success. And last but not least, also to thank the technical team that made this very smooth webinar possible, that was managing the strings in the background and taking your questions and organizing this information webinar. So on behalf of EISMEA, thank you and good luck for the preparation of your proposals. We are looking forward to receive them. And in case you have any questions not related to IT, please use this functional mailbox I was presenting. All the questions will be taken up and replied there. Please check the FAQ on the Funding and Tenders portal too. So don't hesitate to ask immediately when you have a doubt. And any IT-related questions, there is the IT help desk. Helene, would you also like to address a final word?
Thank you very much. I wish you a lot of inspiration, find good partners, and we look forward to excellent proposals. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Goodbye.